I have an announcement to make. I am fresh out of ideas. And at this point, I'm just about desperate for really anything right now. Any ideas that I could use to talk about. Wait, I'm in a desperate situation, and desperate situations call for desperate measures. Good thing, as the prepared person I am, I created a box just for this kind of situation. Let's see what we get. Damn, Past Me was a genius!
When people think of legendary game companies, most will immediately think of companies like Nintendo, Sega, or PlayStation, the big hitting console manufacturers and leading game developers of the industry. But one that will always come to my mind is Capcom. Founded in May of 1979, Capcom, like many other companies at the time, started off developing small arcade games over the course of the early to late 80s. The quality definitely varied, and because of that, many of these games are hardly recognizable today. I mean, ask anyone if they know what X's is, and they'll be wondering how the hell they ended up in math class. It wasn't until 1987 when Capcom finally began to make waves in the industry. In this year alone, we got 3 of some of Capcom's most iconic franchises: Bionic Commando, Mega Man, and what I believe to be Capcom's most important long-standing franchise, Street Fighter. Street Fighter 1 was a game of many firsts, and a pioneer of what will become the entire fighting game genre as we know it, especially when it comes to titles that make absolutely no sense. Here we have a game called Street Fighter, yet they hardly ever fight on the streets. Are you telling me I can just put random words together and call it a title? What's next? You're going to tell me that I can just call any fighting game Melty Blood? God damn it! Throughout Street Fighter 1's development, director Takashi Nishiyama and planner Hiroshi Matsumoto referenced other early fighting games and beat-em-ups to form the game's overall style and type of gameplay. The most notable of these being Karate Champ, 1-2 Kung Fu, and an earlier game they made with Capcom, Avenger. These all served as their primary inspirations, and it shows. Just looking at the box art, it is very much indicative of 80s martial arts films in both the positive and the negative. That's not Ryu, that's Gavin's alcoholic stepdad Robert. Street Fighter 1 set out with a clear goal in mind: to make the most complex fighting game at the time, and to its credit, that is exactly what it did. Many staples of the fighting game genre can be traced all the way back to this game. Whether it be combos, special moves, or buttons representing different strengths, there was no other game like it. So let's get right into the game and see what it's all about.
So you're telling me that this game, Street Fighter, was so bad that you started bleeding from your head?
More like phlebotomized, but yes.
Isn't this Street Fighter game the one with Chun-Li and Cammy?
It's just Ryu and Ken in this one.
Who? Ryu? Who's this Ryu guy? I only know Jury.
Listen, you're a doctor, right? Could I at least get some medical assistance with this wound?
well, it seems to me you kind of already diagnosed yourself, although that wound is kind of bad, so I'd see a doctor for that one.
So are you or are you not a doctor?
If my 3 years of self-taught experience has taught me anything, I think so.
Why did you choose this profession anyways?
I don't know, it sounded cool. So, hey, since both of us are already here, why don't you continue with your story about this Street Fighter 1?
Oh, right. Where was I? This game is
Garbage! Oh, whoops, sorry, got ahead of myself there. This game, when it initially launched in arcades, shipped without a standard arcade layout, where instead of using a 6-button configuration, it instead featured 2 pressure-sensitive pads that, depending on how hard they were hit, scales the speed and damage of the attacks. The harder you hit them, the stronger but slower the attacks become, just like God intended. I'm not kidding when I say I'd much rather play on this version, because give me an actual controller and I'm questioning my life choices. This arcade cabinet, later known as the Deluxe cabinet, didn't last long and was soon replaced by the 6-button layout that to this day is the standard for fighting game arcade ports. This switch up was mainly due to the fact that by the very nature of how the pressure pads worked, not only was it expensive and hard to maintain, it encouraged abuse from players as well, since players would even resort to methods as extreme as stomping on the buttons and subsequently getting injured just in order to win the game.
I can't blame him.
Well, I do, and that sounds stupid, like when my last patient came to me instead of a doctor and almost died.
I'm seriously questioning your certifications right now.
You need certifications?
The following year, in 1988, Street Fighter 1 no longer stayed exclusive to the arcades, as porting to other systems began. The first of these being a port for the TurboGrafx 16. This version was developed by Alpha System and published by NEC Avenue in North America and Hudson Soft in Japan. This one in particular is the most notable because much like the original arcade cabinet, the TurboGrafx 16 only had 2 face buttons. So the strength of attacks was determined by how long either of the action buttons were held down. This was arguably more archaic than the original pressure pad design. Other ports included the Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, Amstrad CPC, Amiga, and Atari ST, all of which were developed by Tiertex instead of Alpha System, and these were all published in the same year of 1988. There was also a scrapped 8-bit NES version of this game, but it was cancelled early on and thus never sold to players. This single screenshot is the only evidence that can prove this game ever existed. Was it good? Bad? Either way, I wouldn't have touched this game with a 10-foot pole. Or so I like to tell myself. I'm playing through Street Fighter 1 as a part of the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection that features games starting from 1 and ending with Third Strike, the definitive third entry in the series. Just ignore all of these. I always appreciate these collections as they are a pretty convenient way to experience a lot of older games within a single package. Capcom loves doing these with their retro titles, and I greatly appreciate them because thank God I don't have to download Street Fighter 1 from the internet. These game collections tend to add quite a bit of content on top of the games being offered. These additions usually come in the form of extra modes, such as in-game galleries and jukeboxes, that tie these games into a nice cohesive whole, along with save states and rewind features that, while present in this collection, I use sparingly. Generously. I will admit, I do feel dirty whenever I use this feature. I make sure to wash my hands thoroughly after every use. But man, is it just too convenient, and it saves a ton of frustration and time. Now you may say that I'm playing it the unintended way, but come on, it's Street Fighter 1! Opening up, this game greets you with a brick wall that is suddenly punched down by this random guy who I'll call Steve, soon revealing the title of the game, Street Fighter. No music, no flashiness, just a black background to remind me of my lack of self-esteem. After a minute of self-reflection, hitting the start button will immediately greet you with this screen that asks you what might be the hardest question I've ever had to answer. Japan or USA? Being held at gunpoint, I think USA is the better option after all. Playing through the single player mode, you can normally play as only one character, that being Robert. And Robert's goal in the story is to defeat warriors all around the world and become the greatest fighter ever. And for some reason, you're also fighting against awful audio compression and an active bomb threat. However, alternatively, you can play through the game as Robert's rival Ken. But calling this a different character is being a little generous, as both characters play the exact same. Not to mention, Ken can only be accessed if you started the game with another player, so good luck making that happen.
No! I know exactly what you want me to do, and I'm not doing that.
I didn't even say anything.
The single player mode consists of a series of battles against 10 opponents from 5 different nations. these being Retsu and Geki from Japan, Steve and Mike from the United States, Lee and Gen from China, Birdie and Eagle from England, and finally Adon and Sagat from Thailand, with Sagat serving as the final boss in the game. Finishing this game isn't as much of a difficult task as it is a tedious one. It only took me about 30 minutes to beat it, but saying it is painful is putting it lightly. Each opponent has to be beaten in a best of 3 rounds to move on, and to do this, you can utilize jumping attacks, standing attacks, and crouching attacks. And like I said before, all of these vary in strength and speed depending on which buttons you press. Light buttons are the fastest but weakest, while heavy buttons are the slowest but strongest. I wish there was that much strategy in the actual game. I personally found 4 jumping attacks and standing kicks to be the most effective of these, but none of these hold a candle to the special moves, which are performed by a directional input plus a button. There's a Hadoken, a traveling projectile, the Tatsumaki Senpyukaku, a spinning kick, and the Shoryuken, a vertical uppercut. They all have different uses, but one thing they all have in common is their ludicrous damage output, which can even take out opponents in single hits. Now, you may be thinking, oh wow, that sounds so strong, you should just do that all the time. Listen here, I'm trying to make these special inputs work is so incredibly hard for no reason, and it can feel like they never existed in the first place with how rarely they actually work. Wait, hold on, 1 second. There! Oh wow, my hands changed color! Each round is 30 seconds long, so matches often feel like huge scrambles to get as many special moves out as possible to gain enough of a life lead to win. That is the same strategy you must use against every character, because the computer, unlike you, doesn't have any fingers to break. It's less of trying to win and more like fighting with the game itself. Thankfully, the game does toss in some mini games here and there, which, unlike the rest of the game, actually work and are fun time wasters. My favorite of these is the board breaking minigame, which involves using the correct attacks to break the boards properly so that you can finish it all in the fastest amount of time. This one was always fun whenever it popped up. When it comes to the sprite work, it's not necessarily bad, but it is far from pretty. The backgrounds look okay, they can range from rather basic to weirdly photorealistic, but at least they deliver more consistently than the character art. That already doesn't look good when standing still, but when in motion, it just looks horrendous. Animations are clunky and stiff, and there's no feeling of weight behind anything, as the characters just hop around the screen and flail their arms and legs like they're in a cheap stop motion play. I also just can't help but feel like the proportions are just ever so slightly off. I don't get it. Oh, and don't get me started on the music. The music in this game is no doubt some of the worst music I've ever had the displeasure of listening to. And trust me, I know what the Sega 32X Doom soundtrack sounds like.
Oh, so that's what Titness sounds like!
You know though, despite all of the complaints, despite all of the mental and physical injury I have sustained, even if it genuinely is an awful experience that I never recommend to anyone, I still can't be mad at it. It may be a mess to play, but without this mess, the fighting game genre would not be the way it is today. It introduced so many mechanics that while now seem underbaked, at the time it was truly groundbreaking. This definitively set the groundwork for the future of his genre. It is to no one's surprise that it never matched the popularity of his sequels, but it stumbled so that the rest of the series could run. And run fast they did. It was rough, yet it birthed something special, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
So you're telling me that not only did this video game make your head bleed, but also your ears and your hands?
Lobotomized, but it has also affected my sanity.
Lobotomized. So are we done here? I have another appointment to make.
Wait, why are you leaving so early? I still have 50 more pages to read to you.
Oh really? That sounds so wonderful. Here, take this.
A lawn service?
Whoops, wrong one. Here's the right one.
A coupon?
Oh, that's the wrong side.
Oh, great. I'll make sure to give you a call. Well, I can't let this all go to waste. I'm desperate for just about anyone at this point to listen to me talk about Street Fighter 1. Just about anyone. Now, in order to properly talk about this, we need to go back to the beginning. And why the number one f***ing sucks?